Hello everybody, once again, thank you for joining us for our bird identification class. My name is Linda and I'm Senior Naturalist with Lorain County Metro Parks. And for this session, we are at French Creek Nature Center and we are going to be talking about winter bird residence and bird feeding. So we're going to talk about some of the birds that you can expect to see here during the winter time and how to identify them. Just make sure that you always have your handy dandy bird field guide. And another helpful tool is your bird checklist, which tells you what season that you can expect to see certain birds. So those are two helpful things to have with you. Okay, well, first off, why do birds migrate? They migrate because it's too cold, right? Nope, they migrate because it's too cold for their food source. Okay, so hummingbirds, no flowers. Warblers, no juicy caterpillars. Ducks and geese, their pond is frozen over. Okay, so these birds migrate. All right, there are some birds that stay here all year that you are familiar with, such as the cardinal. However, they will change their diet or their food source. So cardinals usually prefer juicy insects during the summertime, but in the wintertime then they switch their diet over to berries and fruits as well as seeds. Robins will switch their diet from insects and worms to berries and fruit. Okay, so there are some birds that migrate, some birds that stay here all year. So for those birds that stay here all year, they have to keep warm by kind of puffing out their outer body feathers or their contour feathers and creating a nice airspace. And it's the soft, fluffy down feathers underneath that insulates them and keeps them warm. If you ever have had a down jacket or a down blanket, you don't want to give that up during the wintertime because it's nice and toasty. As far as their legs go, they really don't have any meat on their legs. Their legs and feet are basically made up of ligaments and tendons and bones, so they don't really get cold. All right, then there's also some birds that migrate here and stay here for the winter time, and those are called our winter residents. So some of those are the Junko and some sparrows, and we will go into identifying those. So let's talk about some basic characteristics that you need to look for when identifying birds. You kind of look at their size and shape. Our little chickadee here, look how big his head is compared to the mourning dove's small head. So size and shape is something that you want to utilize to help you identify birds. Do they have a special feature about them? Crests. Okay, the cardinal has a crest, the tufted titmouse has a crest, pileated woodpecker has a crest, cedar waxwing, hooded merganser, and blue jay. Okay, so all those birds have that crest that could help you identify what it is. Okay, do they sit in a certain posture? Okay, we're all familiar with the robin. This is an evening grosbeak. They have the similar posture. And then another posture is with the tail and the body kind of angled. We have a towhee, a catbird, and we have a wren, and then a mockingbird down here. So you can kind of see that those have a particular posture. So the posture could be another indication as to what bird that it is. And when we're talking about sizes of birds, this here is a little Junko, okay? And he is kind of slate gray. One identifying characteristic of Junkos is they have white outer tail feathers. Oops. And then we'll compare them to size to the fox sparrow. This guy is more of a ground feeder, and he's got striping on his belly and breast. And fox sparrows can be identified by their behavior. They like to scratch around on the ground looking for seeds to eat. Okay, do they have any special markings or stripings? These two birds here, this is a white-throated sparrow. Nice little white bib underneath his beak, and then a white crowned sparrow. He's got that zebra striping on his head. And overall, his body is a nice light gray color. another bird that we will see at the feeders sometimes is the little tree sparrow. He's kind of got a central dust mark spot on his belly. And then sometimes, if you're lucky, you will see the Carolina wren. You could see the bold striping between his eye and beak and his eyebrow. Sometimes you see a flurry of these birds here. These are hawks. And when you're setting up your bird feeders, I suggest that you don't put evergreen trees too close to the feeders, because these predators, the hawks as well as some cats, might sit in there waiting to pounce on an unsuspecting feeder bird. So that's something to keep in mind when you are setting up your bird feeder. Okay, so another thing we can talk about, beaks. The blue jay has kind of like a chisel-shaped beak, as well as the little woodpeckers. They have a chisel-shaped beak. Okay, a couple other birds that have a chisel-shaped beak is the chickadee and then the nuthatch. So the interesting thing, they have the same shaped beak, but they forage for food in a different way. The blue jay will sometimes pack 10 seeds in his mouth, fly off, hold the seeds between his toes, and peck away to get at the nut meat. The chickadee is more of a grab and go feeder. He will grab a seed and go in another tree and then peck open that seed for the nut meat inside. Whereas the nuthatch will grab a seed, go to a tree, and put the seed in between the bark of the tree. That holds the seed while he pecks the seed open. Boy, that's a lot of work for the little nut meat energy inside that they get. So these birds are always busy looking for food in the wintertime. So sometimes identifying birds, you can just sit and relax and watch their behavior, because that's kind of a fun thing too. Okay, so comparing coloration, we all pretty much are probably familiar with the male cardinal. You can see him up there, and then the female cardinal right behind me on the wall mural. Some coloration between the male and female birds is not always so obvious, such as the white-breasted nuthatch. The male has a darker black patch on his head, whereas the female, it's more of a slate gray color. So sometimes you might need the help of a nice sunny day to determine if the nuthatch is a male or female. Another bird that we're probably familiar with is the beautiful goldfinch male. In the summertime, he has that bright plumage. However, during the wintertime, he will molt his colors and then appear very similar in color to the female goldfinch. Now, one of our winter residents that we get here is the pine siskin. And look, they are very close in the size and shape of each other, the pine siskin and goldfinch. But the pine siskin has striping on its chest and really no yellow coloration on it. So the pine siskin is one of our winter visitors that we have. Okay, so in going again with coloration and sizes, when we look at the woodpeckers, two common woodpeckers that come to our feeder is the downy woodpecker and the hairy woodpecker. Okay, you can definitely see the size difference, not only in their body, but look at the size of its beak. Look how much bigger that beak is of the hairy woodpecker to almost the invisible beak of the little downy woodpecker. The back of their heads, the male has red. Okay, now this is actually the back of the hairy woodpecker. He has like a dark stripe, whereas the male downy woodpecker does not have that dividing stripe. It just has the little red spot behind it. Okay, another characteristic between the two is that the downy woodpecker will have spots on the white outer tail feathers. However, that may be a little bit harder to tell. So really the easiest way to tell the difference between the downy and the hairy is the relative size. Okay, so going a little bit more with behavior, we have our tree clinging birds. We have the white-breasted nuthatch. That's nicknamed the upside down bird. This bird will hang upside down on the trees and go down the tree trunk, whereas this little guy here, the brown creeper, will actually go upwards and spiral around the tree. And these guys are common here during the winter time. We don't have them nesting here in the summer. Cousin to the white-breasted nuthatch is the red-breasted nuthatch. You could see the dark zebra pattern striping on his head, and then of course more of the reddish breast. They like areas where there's a lot of evergreen trees, so keep on the lookout for those guys. Okay, so then we have some of our other winter visitors. We have the kinglets. These guys are really small. They are smaller than the juncos. The ruby-crowned kinglet, you can see when he gets upset, he kind of puffs up his crest feathers, and then the golden-crowned kinglet. The ruby-crowned kinglet also has an eye ring. I remember that as a ring, ruby ring, eye ring, okay? And then we have a redpoll and the finch here. So the redpoll just has red kind of right near the front of his head. Then we also have a couple birds that we see periodically. They're called nomads, and that would be the evening grosbeak. They fly in flocks. Cardinals will also be seen in flocks during the winter time, as well as the cedar waxwing. Whoops, sorry. Okay, so these guys will travel in flocks and feed on fruits and berries. So sometimes you may see them or sometimes you may not. It kind of depends on which way the wind blows and where the food is that they can find. So another interesting thing about a common bird that you're familiar with, the blue jay, he kind of lands like a bomb on branches and on the feeder. So that's kind of an interesting thing that you can view at the feeders. And then wanted to compare the size difference. We have the red-bellied woodpecker here, and then the downy woodpecker, geez, almost half his size there. The red-bellied woodpecker is really about the size of a robin, okay? But then he's got that chisel-like beak. This one happens to be a male red-bellied woodpecker. Both the male and the female have red on their head. The difference is that this one is a male because the red goes all the way to his beak. The female would not have that red on her head there. Hang on one sec. Sorry. So here's the female. She does not have the red extending from her nape all the way to the top of her beak. And some people say, why do they call it a red-bellied woodpecker? It does not have a red belly. Well, some of them, the red seems a little bit more prominent than others. Okay, so a couple other winter visitors that you may see. Of course, always the big exciting thing is the snowy owls. Those typically can be found in open fields or along the lakeshore, like Burke Lakefront Airport, and even on some of the jetties. Another one that's not so common is the crossbill. So those guys will often be seen near evergreen trees because they eat those seeds of the pine cones. So that's an interesting bird, and not very common here to be seen during the winter time. So you may have to search one of those out. A couple others which tend to be more in fields is the snow bunting. Some people say it's a sign of good luck. Let's hope we see them this year. And then the horned lark. This guy is really cool, but these guys will be more in open field, cultivated areas, and so they're really pretty cool to see. So there are sources to rare bird, and you can Google, unique birds in Ohio or rare birds in Ohio, and some of these things might pop up that are not typically here during the year, or rarities such as the snowy owl. And so anyway, so that's a little bit about bird identification for our winter residents. We're going to talk a little bit about bird feeding, and make sure that you check the Lorain County Metro Parks programs for any upcoming programs, field trips, and hikes that will help you get your birding skills up. Thank you.